First, bow to heaven and earth." The usher's high, sharp responsive voices echoed through the wedding hall, making my eardrums ache slightly. I clutched one end of the red silk in my hand. At the other end was my fiancé, Song Chae, a young man recently promoted to Vice Minister of Rights and new noble of the capital. Through the heavy crimson veil, I could smell the rich sandalwood drifting in the air, and the cool pinneanding scent from Song Chae. But at the very moment we were about to bow, the great doors of the bridal hall, which had been tightly shut, were suddenly flung open from the outside. Cold wind mixed with shouting rushed in at once, rustling the tassels above my head. "Stop. She's an imposter. She isn't the Lu family's legitimate daughter at all." A piercing, delicate female voice ripped through the wedding hall's festivity. The hall instantly erupted. The guests' whispers surged like a tide. I did not move, only peered through the slit in the bridal veil and quietly watched the floor. In my sight, a pair of embroidered shoes, washed pale, trembled as they stepped onto the bright red wedding carpet and stopped in the center of the hall. "Father, mother, I am the biological daughter you've searched for these 15 years, Lu Jin." The woman fell to her knees with a thud, the sound of her knees striking the ground heavy and decisive. She raised both hands high, holding in her palms a blood-colored jade pendant that refracted an eerie red light under the sun. It was the token passed down through generations in the Lu family of the Duke of Yonghwa's household, the Lu family's blood jade. Originally seated on the high dais, Duke Lu Yongcheng of Yonghua and his wife Madame Shen suddenly stood, overturning the teacup beside them. The sound of porcelain shattering was crisp and jarring. This really is the blood jade. You truly are my Jeaner who was lost all those years." Madame Shen's voice trembled beyond composure. Disregarding decorum, she lifted her skirt and hurried down the steps. Song Chae released the red silk. The strip of red silk fell to the ground like a winding streak of blood. He did not look at me, but stepped forward quickly and helped Lu Jin, who was kneeling, to his feet, his movements gentle and careful, as if cradling some incomparable treasure. "My lord, madam, since this concerns the Lu family's bloodline, this ceremony cannot proceed." Song Chae turned around, his voice cold and righteously indignant. "I am marrying the rightful heir of the Duke of Yong's household. If I were to marry an impostor of unknown origin, it would not only bring shame on the Song family but also be an affront to His Majesty." This scene was truly amusing. On the eve of our marriage, Song Chae still held my hand and vowed passionately that I alone would be his for life. But now, a mysterious woman appeared holding a jade pendant, and he, without any verification, couldn't wait to let go of the red ribbon. Lu Jin raised her tear-streaked face and gave me a provocative, triumphant look, then quickly switched to a trembling, pitiful expression. "Father, mother, Jeaner doesn't blame sister for taking the 15 years of wealth meant for Jeaner. It's just, today is the great day for the Lu and Song families. And Jeaner doesn't want Lord Song to marry the wrong person." Lu Yongchang's face went ashen as he looked at me. There was no longer the loving warmth of old, only the anger and coldness of someone who had been deceived. "Yener, back then I felt indebted for your birth father's life-saving deed. And with Jeaner missing, I proclaimed to the world that you were my own child. Now that the real daughter has returned, you must give that identity back to Jeaner." Everyone was watching me, waiting to see me weep, waiting to see me fall to my knees and beg for mercy. After all, to fall from being the heir of the exalted duke's household to the orphan of a lowly guard, such a fall was enough to drive any sheltered young lady mad. I slowly raised my hand, without the slightest hesitation, and tore off the bright red bridal veil from my head. The glaring sunlight made me squint slightly, but there was not a trace of panic or sorrow on my face. I looked at the perfectly staged scene before me, and the corner of my mouth even began to curve into a smile. Lu Jin meticulously orchestrated this wedding hall fiasco, with Song Chae's defection and the parents' coldness. Each move linked to the next, truly a clever scheme. Only, she miscalculated one thing. I turned my head, my gaze passing over the chaotic crowd and settling on the foremost guest seat. There sat a man in a dark python robe. He held a teacup, his long fingers idly tracing the rim, and his narrow phoenix-like eyes were full of amusement. The imperial regent of the current dynasty, Chu Yuan. He seemed to notice my gaze, slightly raising an eyebrow, and lifted his teacup toward me from across the room. I withdrew my eyes and looked at Lu Jin and Song Che in front of me, speaking calmly. Since Miss Lu Jin is the true legitimate daughter, and Minister Song is so attached to the words the heir of the Duke's household, then this bride shall be replaced. At these words, the wedding hall fell silent instantly. Song Che frowned, apparently not expecting me to agree so readily. Lu Yen, stop putting on this show. You have held Jiner's position all these years. It should return to its rightful owner. Do you think by retreating you'll soften my heart? Your worry is unnecessary. Lord Song. I deliberately took off the heavy phoenix coronet from my head and tossed it onto the wedding table, producing a dull clack. Lu Yen, never force what does not belong to me. I looked at Lu Jin, a faint, almost imperceptible pity in my eyes. Since you wish to have the status of the Duke's legitimate daughter and desire this marriage, sister will give them to you. I only hope you will not regret it later. Lu Jin looked at my unusually calm reaction, a flash of panic passing through her eyes, but it was quickly drowned by overwhelming greed. She nestled tightly in Song Che's arms and said weakly, "Thank you, sister, for making this possible. From today onward, Lu Yen is no longer a member of the Lu family. Today's wedding the bride is replaced by Lu Jin." Lu Yongchang slammed his hand on the table and made the decision on the spot. I turned around, and under everyone's watchful eyes, lifted the elaborate wedding dress train and strode out of the hall. No lingering, no looking back. They thought they were seizing mountains of gold and silver, supreme glory, but they had no idea that today's Marquis of Yongguo's residence was merely a gilded shell with rot inside. Because Lu Yongchang was a gambler and a poor manager, the Marquis had long secretly incurred a massive debt of 300,000 taels of silver to the Ministry of Revenue, and the reason the emperor had not acted was entirely because I held the Yanzi merchant seal that could actually mobilize half of Jiangnan's trade guilds, that imperial iron certificate and cinnabar edict, personally naming me Lu Yen as the heir to the Marquis's estates, now lay safely in my secret chamber. What Lu Jin wanted was nothing more than a hollow title, and my reply to her will be this entire Duke's mansion, a bottomless abyss. The moment I stepped out the gate, the rejoicing behind me resumed, louder and more enthusiastic than before. I exhaled a breath of foul air and instantly felt light and free. "Miss Lu, you leave in such a hurry. Are you rushing to my residence for tea?" A low, resonant, magnetic voice sounded from the side. I stopped walking. Chu Yuan had somehow followed me and was now leaning against the prince's carriage, watching me with a hint of a smile. "I have no home to return to now. If your highness is willing to take me in, I would be most grateful." I bowed slightly, a sharp glint in my eyes. "Get in." Chu Yuan shifted slightly and lifted the carriage curtain. "I want to see how you plan to prepare a gift in return for them." The day we moved into the side courtyard, a fine drizzle hung in the sky. I only brought one personal maid and 2 trunks of change of clothes. The rest of my fine garments and gold accessories were all left behind in my former maiden quarters. Lu Jin, impatient, arrived with Mother Shen and a gaggle of old women. She had already changed into the full-length golden brocade dress I usually favored. Because her figure was slightly fuller than mine, the dress looked a bit tight on her. Yet she somehow managed to wear it with the proud air of a nouveau riche. "Sis, this place is really shabby. I'm sorry for you." Lu Jin said the words of condolence, but the gloating at the corners of her eyes was almost spilling over. She glanced around the cold room, which didn't even have a coal brazier, and finally fixed her eyes on the stack of account books and the bunch of brass keys on my writing desk. "Now that Jiner has returned home, the internal affairs of the Guogong mansion should no longer trouble an outsider." Madame Shen looked at me coldly, not even willing to call me Yenner anymore. "Hand over the housekeeper's keys and the account books. You've profited for so many years. It's time you were satisfied." I lowered my lashes, hiding the flicker of a cold smile at the corner of my eyes. Satisfied? If they knew what lay behind this housekeeper's authority, they'd probably beg me on their knees to take it back and still be too late. Mother's admonition is well taken. I obediently stood, handing over the keys and the ledgers with both hands. The Guogong mansion has many holdings. These 3 books are the main ledgers for the shops in the capital and the estates outside the city. Now that my sister intends to manage them, of course they belong to her. Lu Jin snatched the heavy ring of keys as if clutching some supreme power. She opened the top ledger and, seeing the entry that read 80,000 taels in cash on hand, her breathing quickened. There's actually this much ready money in the account. Lu Jin cried out in astonishment and hurriedly showed off to Mrs. Shen. Madame Shen's eyes lit up. Her previously tense face instantly broke into a smile, and she gave me a sidelong look. I'll give you credit, you were honest and didn't fiddle with the accounts. How could this humble woman dare? I bowed slightly, my tone respectful and meek. Of course they couldn't see the problem. That 80,000 taels of silver really was sitting in the Guogong mansion's treasury. What they didn't know was that it wasn't the mansion's profit at all, but operating funds from my yen guild that were being stored in the mansion's vault. The Dao state's laws are strict. Those not registered as merchants may not open money shops at will, to avoid the court's heavy taxes on traders. I deposited part of the Yanziho's funds in the Duke's mansion under the name of temporary storage. Although the ledger records it as current silver, the deed filed with the authorities clearly lists the ownership of that money under my personal name, Lu Yen. As long as I present the deed bearing my private seal to the authorities, those 80,000 taels of silver can be legally withdrawn from the Duke's mansion treasury at any time. Not only that, Duke of Yonghua, Lu Yongcheng, is a compulsive gambler. Over the years he has accumulated gambling debts outside, and the 3/10 sandtail shortfall the mansion must repay the Ministry of Revenue each year has been secretly covered by me using the profits of the Yanziho. And the 10th day of next month is the day the Ministry of Revenue sends people to collect the year's deficit silver. Sister, this ledger is complicated. You must read it carefully, I kindly reminded. Especially the transactions inside, there must be no mistakes. Humph. It's just looking at a ledger. What's so hard? Lu Jin arrogantly closed the account book and tied the key firmly to her waist. Sister should worry more about her own future. Brother Che is going to marry me now, and when we have our wedding next month, there will be even less room for you in this mansion. At the mention of Song Che, a flush rose to Lu Jin's face, her pride plain to see. Then let me congratulate my younger sister and Minister Song in advance. May you have 100 years of harmony. I smiled gently. Song Che was now eager to cling to power and assumed that by marrying Lu Jin he would secure a steady stream of financial support from the Duke of Yang's household. But he had no idea that the woman he was about to bring into his home was a clay idol who would drag him down into hell along with her. After sending off the impatient mother and daughter, I turned and instructed the maid standing by. Go deliver a message to shopkeeper Lu of Yen Brand. Starting tomorrow, cut off all shipments of silk, tea, and rouge to the Duke's residence. Also, tell the 10 largest grain merchants in the capital to stop extending credit to the Duke's household. Yes, miss. A flash of excitement crossed the maid's eyes as she took the order and left. Cutting off the supply from the Yen Brand would instantly double the daily expenses of the Duke's household. And Lu Yongcheng and Madame Shen, accustomed to fine clothes and rich food, would never lower their standard of living. I want to see how long Lu Jin's string of keys at his waist can stay smug without my financial backing. At midnight, a faint rustling came from the bamboo grove in the side courtyard. I did not panic. I simply opened the window calmly. Sure enough, Chu Yuan, dressed all in black and wearing a slight smile, stood in the moonlight holding a box of exquisite pastries. I've heard you had a miserable day today. Even your supper was nothing but plain fare. Chu Yuan climbed through the window and, as if it were the most natural thing, sat down on my fainting couch. Your Highness is very well informed. I walked over, unceremoniously snatched the pastry box from his hand, picked one up and popped it into my mouth. Sweet but not cloying, the handiwork of the Jinxian pavilion in the capital. I merely came to see whether my future partner is truly being driven out, Chu Yuan said, propping his chin in his hand, his phoenix-like eyes full of amusement. Rest assured, Prince, the Duke's household will be begging me to return sooner or later. I swallowed the pastry and regarded him calmly. However, I need the prince to do me a small favor. Oh, do tell. when the Ministry of Revenue collects the shortage of silver on the 10th day of next month. I ask that the prince casually mention to the emperor that the Duke of Yong's household has recently received a considerable influx of funds and will likely be able to settle the 300,000 taels of debt accumulated over the years in one go. I smiled faintly. In the moonlight my gaze was especially cold. Chu Yuan was momentarily stunned, then burst into a low laugh. Lu Yen, you truly are vicious. He reached out as if to pat my head, but I tilted away. He wasn't offended. He merely withdrew his hand, his eyes glittering with ambition. However, I like it. I'll do you this favor. I'm also curious to see what expression Song Che will have when he discovers that the woman he married into the household is a magnet for debts and misfortune. Then thank you, Prince. I lifted my teacup, using tea in place of wine, and nodded to him. Moonlight spilled over the courtyard's open ground. In the silence, a storm that would sweep through the Marquis residence was gathering. Lu Jin. You thought you had seized glory and wealth, but you didn't know that it was the perfect burial place I had carefully chosen for you. In the first week after Lu Jin took over the steward's authority, the Duke's residence was ablaze with activity and festooned with flowers and brocade. To flaunt her status as the true legitimate daughter, she ostentatiously replaced all the old decorations in the residence and bought expensive shoe brocade for each household. She even set up a flowing banquet in the gathering pavilion for 3 days, inviting every famous lady and noblewoman in the capital, all to show off the string of golden housekeeper's keys at her waist. I was sitting in the quiet side courtyard, listening to the distant sound of strings and bamboo flutes, leisurely trimming the dead branches in the pot. Miss Manager Lu has already taken care of it. Early this morning, the 6 major grain firms and 4 silk houses in the capital had their stewards posted at the main gate of the Duke's residence, saying they need to check the accounts and settle the outstanding balances from previous years. The maid Biha came in, her eyes showing an unabashed smile. I set down the shears and smiled faintly. Didn't Lu Jin say I seized her fortune? Then the price behind that fortune should be borne by her as well. At the same time, in the main hall of the Duke's residence, Lu Jinjing accompanied Song Che in choosing the wedding attire. Mrs. Chen sat beside them, looking at the pair with a face full of affection. Jeaner. This wedding dress with 100 birds facing the phoenix costs 3,000 taels of silver. It's a bit expensive, but only it is worthy of your status, Mrs. Chen said with a smile. Lu Jin looked bashful and turned to Song Che. Brother Che, what do you think? Just as Song Che was about to praise it, the steward Lu Fu stumbled in, his face as pale as a ghost. Madam, second miss, it's bad. Outside are all debt collectors. Lu Jin's face stiffened as she scolded. What nonsense are you spouting? The Duke's household is large and prosperous. Where would debtors come from? Tell them to get lost. They won't leave. Lu Fu said through tears. Manager Lu brought the contracts, saying the silks and teas we keep in their custody are supposed to be paid for monthly. In the past, Lu Yen, the eldest miss, used her private funds to settle them. If the eldest miss stops supplying, they're demanding immediate repayment of this quarter's arrears of 5,000 taels, or they'll report us to the authorities for fraud. Before Lu Jin could react, the housemaid in charge of purchases came crawling in. Second miss. The grain merchants refused to deliver rice and grain anymore, saying our household still owes them 2,000 taels in old debts. If we don't pay, starting tomorrow the Duke's household will be cut off from provisions. Lu Jin sprang to her feet, the teacup in her hand nearly slipping from her grasp. How is this possible? Isn't there still 80,000 taels of silver in the account? She hurriedly led Madame Shen and Song Che toward the storeroom, when she used the string of golden keys to open the heavy door. Dozens of large redwood chests were indeed neatly stacked inside. Buoyed with confidence, Lu Jin pointed at the chests and snorted at the creditors who had followed them. Do you think I, miss of the Lu family, could still owe you this little silver? Lu Fu, open the chests and take the money. With a bang, the first chest was pried open, and the inside glittered with gold. Shopkeeper Lu walked forward in a leisurely manner, took out a contract stamped with an official seal from his bosom, and said coldly, Second miss. Wait. The sealing tag at the bottom of this chest bears the private seal Yan trademark. According to Dao law, deposited items must not be touched by anyone other than their owner. This silver was deposited here as working capital by Miss Lu Yen. The contract states it clearly. The Duke's mansion only has custodial rights, not usage rights. Lu Jin screamed. Nonsense. This is the Duke's mansion's warehouse. Of course the silver belongs to the Duke's mansion. If the second miss doesn't believe me, we can go to the Shuntian Prefecture Court and settle it. Shopkeeper Lu sneered, waved his hand, and dozens of able-bodied porters unexpectedly followed behind him. Today I act on Miss Lu Yan's orders, and in accordance with the contract, I will retrieve the full 80,000 taels of deposited silver. The contract has matured. Not a single coin will remain. Under the stunned gazes of Lu Jin and Madame Shen, chest after chest of silver was carried away in public. The once overflowing warehouse, in less than half an hour, became utterly empty, leaving only a floor covered in dust. Impossible. How could this be? Lu Jin slumped to the ground, clutching the string of keys that had already lost all meaning. Song Che's face was dark with a frightening gloom. The reason he had rushed to side with Lu Jin, beyond lust, was largely the financial backing behind the Prince of Yonghua's residence. But now, that behemoth seemed to have turned into an enormous empty shell. Before they could recover from their shock, the heavy sound of boots came from outside. A squad of Ministry of Revenue officers in flying fish uniforms strode into the courtyard, led by the Right Vice Minister of the Ministry of Revenue. His expression was solemn as he unfolded an imperial edict in his hand. Lord of Yonghua, Lu Yongcheng, receives the imperial edict. Lu Yongcheng heard the commotion as well and tumbled out, crawling and scrambling to his knees. The sovereign has issued an oral decree. I have heard that the Yonghua residence has recently taken in considerable revenue and held banquets for 3 days and nights. Since the Duke's household is well off, the 30,000 taels of deficit silver owed to the Ministry of Revenue over the years shall be settled within 3 days. If payment is overdue, the clan registry will revoke the title and confiscate and seal the residence. 30,000 taels. Lu Yongcheng screamed in agony and fainted on the spot. The Shen family and Lu Jin felt as if struck by thunder. They were completely stunned. 300,000 tael selling them off wouldn't even raise a fraction of that. Song Che stood to one side, his body swaying slightly. He had just been promoted to vice minister and this was precisely the time to prove himself before the emperor. If his future in-laws became disgraced debt evaders, his career would be ruined for good. These accounts have always been managed by Lu Yen. These debts must be traps, she said on purpose. Lu Jin, as if clutching at a final straw, ran madly toward the side courtyard. When she barged through the side courtyard gate, I was sitting at the stone table brewing tea. Lu Yen, you bitch. Where did you put the silver? You deliberately framed the Duke's household. I'll kill you. Lu Jin's eyes were bloodshot as she reached out to grab my face. I turned aside to avoid her and, with my other hand, delivered a heavy slap across her face. Crack. I put my full strength into that strike. She fell onto the stone bench, blood welling at the corner of her mouth. Lu Jin, you can eat carelessly, but you mustn't speak carelessly. I gracefully wiped my hands, my gaze cold. You snatched the house keys yourself. And you examined the account book yourself. For the past 15 years I have poured my heart and soul into covering the losses of the Duke's household. And the first thing you did when you returned was squander recklessly and show off. Now when disaster strikes, you think of me. You must have money. Lady Shen rushed in after her, her tone commanding. Don't you have that yen brand? Hurry and hand over those 300,000 taels. Otherwise we'll accuse you of embezzling the family fortune. I looked at the woman who had worn the mask of a kind mother for 15 years and felt nothing but disgust. Embezzling the family fortune. Madame Shen. Do you want me to present to His Majesty all the IOUs the Duke accumulated at the gambling houses over these 15 years and the record of every single silver piece I put in to cover them? I stood up and looked down on them from above. I've managed the mess of the Duke's household for 5 years and done all I could. Now it's time for the true legitimate daughter to perform her filial duty. Song Che had also reached the courtyard gate by then. He looked at me with an extra mealy complicated expression, laced with a barely noticeable regret and a probe. Lu Jin, if you're willing to help the Duke's household through this crisis, we can renegotiate the engagement. I can take Jeaner as a concubine. And you will still be the principal wife. It was as if I had heard the biggest joke in the world. I couldn't help but laugh. Minister Song, keep that mercenary deep affection for your real legitimate daughter. Lu Jin, don't take junk. As she spoke, a rapid clip of hooves sounded outside the courtyard. Chu Yuan had arrived at some unknown time. He swung down from his horse, waving a folding fan in his hand, his tone casual yet laced with lethal chill. Oh, everyone's here. Perfect timing. By imperial order, I'm overseeing the Ministry of Revenue's outstanding debts. Second Miss Lu, that 300,000 taels of silver, are you planning to pay it now? Or have Minister Song pay it for you? Song Che's face turned instantly as dark as the bottom of a pot, and he instinctively took a step back. Lu Jin watched that slight movement from Song Che, and the last glimmer of light in his eyes finally went out. The 3-day deadline set by the Board of Revenue hung over the Yonghua Duke's residence like an executioner's blade. In those 3 days, the entire Duke's household was thrown into chaos. Lu Yongchang sold every visible antique and painting in the residence. Madame Shen even pawned her dowry jewelry. But they only managed to scrape together a mere 50,000 taels. Against the 300,000 tael abyss needed to fill the sea, it was like a drop in the bucket. At the end of one's rope, people always managed to summon the nerve to dig their own graves. At night, the oil lamp in the side courtyard burst into a tiny blossom of light. The maid Bai He pushed the door open, walking briskly, her face alight with excitement she could not contain. Miss. The fish took the bait. Bai He lowered her voice and handed over a pawn ticket stamped in red. As you ordered. I made sure Lu Jin's maid overheard that the secluded cabinet in the ancestral hall's backyard contained several unmatched treasures not listed in the records. Lu Jin couldn't resist. Tonight he stole something from there and took it to the underground market pawn shop Wan Jin Chao. I took the pawn ticket and, by the dim candlelight, gave it a glance. On it was written in large characters. 2 East Sea luminous pearls. 1 9-foot blood coral statue. Death penalty. 250,000 taels of silver. I couldn't help but let out a soft laugh. This Lu Jin really was stupid to a breathtaking degree. Those East Sea luminous pearls and the blood coral were imperial tributes bestowed by the late emperor to the Yonghua Duke's residence. Dayo's laws are strict. Privately pawning or selling items bestowed by the emperor is a grave crime of betraying and deceiving the sovereign. Light cases result in exile. Severe cases lead to the entire family being executed and their property confiscated. Where are the items? I set the pawn ticket alight in the candle flame, watching it turn to ash. Wan Jin Chao has always been an enterprise secretly controlled by our Yen family. As soon as the shopkeeper received the goods, he immediately followed your orders and sent people through the back door to the Prince Regent's residence overnight. Bai He replied. Good. I stood up, opened the window, and looked toward the main courtyard of the Duke's mansion where pinprick lights were coming on. By tomorrow morning, the sky over that Duke's house will have completely collapsed. On the 4th morning, the weather was terrifyingly gloomy. Leaden gray clouds pressed down over the capital as if they could fall at any moment. Song Che actually showed up at this time. He was clearly there to probe the truth. If the Duke's household couldn't pay and was confiscated and stripped of its title, he would not hesitate to break off the engagement to avoid being tainted. If they paid, he could continue to be the Duke's household's illustrious son-in-law. In the main hall, Lu Jin had the dark circles of a late night under her eyes. But her expression was exceptionally pleased. She slapped a thick stack of silver notes onto the desk, looking arrogantly at the Ministry of Revenue official beside her. This is 300,000 taels. Not a single one missing. The Duke's household has deep resources. What is this amount of money? Lu Jin raised her chin slightly, her eyes drifting toward Song Che from time to time, as if asking for credit. Seeing this, Song Che's tightly furrowed brows immediately smoothed, and he quickly put on a soft, polished expression. Stepping forward to take Lu Jin's hand, I knew it. Jeaner, as the true legitimate daughter of the Duke's household, naturally has ways to resolve crises. Che Gij. Lu Jin lowered her head shyly. The two of them were all lovey-dovey. A disgustingly sentimental scene. I stood in the corridor outside the main hall, watching with cold eyes. The sarcasm at the corner of my mouth growing deeper. Just as the Ministry of Revenue official finished counting the silver notes and was about to write off the account and leave, bang! The heavy gates of the Duke and Marquis residence were violently kicked open from the outside. A squad of Imperial guards in heavy armor, brandishing long halberds, surged in like a black tide. Immediately encircling the main hall, the clashing of cold plates of armor sounded particularly deafening in the deathly silent courtyard. Everyone in the main hall was stunned by the sudden turn of events. The crowd parted, and the regent Prince Chu Yuan, dressed in a dark brocade robe threaded with gold, stepped in slowly. He toyed with two large, smooth luminous pearls in his hand, and behind him the guards carried a 9-foot blood coral shrouded in red cloth. "Prince, Your Highness, what do you mean by this?" Lu Yongchang's legs went weak. He nearly fell to his knees. Chu Yuan stopped, his phoenix-like eyes narrowing as his cold gaze swept over everyone in the hall. Finally resting on Lu Jin. "This morning I found some extremely familiar items at a pawn shop in the capital's black market." Chu Yuan tossed the luminous pearl on the table. An Eastern Sea luminous pearl, a gift from the late emperor. If I remember correctly, this item was kept in the ancestral hall of the Duke of Yang's residence. What? Is the Duke so broke now he has to pawn even the imperial gifts to get money? Those words landed like a bolt from the blue. Lu Yongchang snapped his head toward the blood coral whose red cloth had been lifted. His eyes bloodshot, a mouthful of fresh blood shooting up his throat. This. How could this be? Who did this? Who stole the imperial gift? Chu Yuan snorted. Drew from his sleeve a document stamped with a red thumbprint. The court attendant at the black market pawn shop has confessed. Last night it was this true legitimate daughter newly brought back to the Duke's mansion who personally took the item and acted as the scapegoat. And here is second. D. Miss Lu's seal. Lu Jin's face went ashen in an instant. Devoid of color. She snatched her hand back from Song Che's grip. Her legs went weak, and she collapsed to the ground. No. It's not true. I didn't know it was an imperial gift. I only wanted to raise money to pay debts. Lu Jin babbled in terror. I embezzled the royal tribute and deceived the sovereign. Chu Yuan's voice had not a hint of warmth, as if coming from the ninefold hell. Guards, seize this impudent, wayward woman, throw her into the death cell, and await sentence. 2 imperial guards, wolfish and tigerish, immediately stepped forward, one on each side, and clamped onto Lu Jin's arms. Brother Che, save me. Lu Jin, as if clutching at a final straw, desperately reached out to Song Che, crying out with a heartrending wail. Yet Song Che's reaction showed everyone what true cold-heartedness and ruthlessness looked like. He not only didn't step forward to plead, but instead recoiled 3 big steps as if avoiding the plague. His once gentle face was now twisted and cold, his eyes full of disgust and terror. Audacious scoundrel, I am innocent, with you do not drag me into this. Song Che shouted angrily, then turned to Chu Yuan and bowed deeply. Your Grace, please see clearly. I knew nothing of this Chedeville's theft of tributes. I am an official appointed by the court. How could I collude with such traitors who flout the law? Lu Jin stood frozen. She looked at the man before her in disbelief, the same man who had sworn eternal fidelity to her yesterday and who had just been holding her hand and praising her. Song Che. You. What did you say? Lu Jin's voice trembled, her eyes full of despair and disbelief. Do you not understand what I said? Song Che, protecting himself, no longer cared about saving face. A filthy-handed idiot like you who dares to steal even the imperial tribute, how could you be worthy to be my wife? Here before the prince, I, Song Che, formally break our engagement. From now on, man and woman, nothing to do with each other. Those words were like a poisoned blade, stabbing hard into Lu Jin's heart. She had once thought that by stealing my identity, she could naturally steal this tender, perfect fiancé. But she would never understand that Song Che never loved any particular person, What he loved was the outrageous wealth that came with being the heir of the Duke of Yonghua. Once this wealth turned into a death warrant, he ran faster than anyone. Song Che, you hypocrite. I hope you die an awful death. Lu Jin completely collapsed, her hair disheveled. She struggled wildly, cursing like a gutter hag. I stepped slowly out of the corridor's shadow, watching coldly as this once lofty perfect couple tore into each other, exposing every ugly side. Chu Yuan watched me approach, a barely perceptible curve touching his lips as he said softly, "This dog-eat-dog show, Miss Lu. Are you satisfied? It's nothing more than reaping what you sow." I stepped in front of Lu Jin, looking down at her tear-streaked face. "Sister, the wealth and status of the Duke's household this lifetime, I'm afraid you won't live to enjoy it." Lu Jin stared at me, then suddenly laughed like a madwoman, her eyes flashing with extreme malice. "Lu Yen, don't gloat. Even if I die, I am still the Duke's true legitimate daughter. You're nothing but a lowly adopted girl. As long as the Emperor investigates thoroughly and verifies the bloodline, you won't have an easy time either." I tilted forward slightly and, in a voice only the two of us could hear, let out a faint laugh. "Then let's see, in the end, who truly is the fake, the one who forged their lineage." My theft of the imperial tribute was reported to the court by Chu Yuan. The old emperor flew into a rage, not only ordering Lu Jin thrown into the prison of the imperial clan office, but also stripping Lu Yongcheng of his Duke of Yonghua title and placing him under house arrest to await punishment. 3 days later, in the main hall of the imperial clan office. Today was the day of the great trial. Not only was Chu Yuan personally supervising the hearing, but the chief judges of the 3 judicial offices were also seated beside him. The hall was cold and grim, with guards holding ceremonial staffs standing densely along both sides. Lu Jin wore a prisoner's uniform, her hair disheveled, with none of the arrogance she had displayed when she first entered the Marquis' residence. She knelt on the cold blue brick floor, the chains on her wrists and ankles emitting harsh clanking sounds. Song Che was also summoned here. He stood to one side, his face pale, doing his best to distance himself from Lu Jin. I was dressed in a plain-colored silk skirt, my expression composed as I stood in the center of the main hall, as if this were not a court where life and death were decided, but the back garden of my own home where I strolled at leisure. "Lu Jin, you privately stole imperial tribute. Pawned it for silver. The evidence is conclusive. What do you have to say for yourself?" The Minister of Justice struck the gavel heavily and shouted sternly. Lu Jin abruptly raised her head, her eyes flashing with the madness of a beast at the brink of death. Knowing she could not escape a death sentence, she actually tried to make one last counterattack in this desperate situation. "Your Highness, I'm innocent. It's her. It's Lu Yen who framed me." Lu Jin pointed at me and screamed hoarsely. "I am the true legitimate daughter of the Duke's household. She wanted to seize my identity and inheritance, so she deliberately set a trap to lure me into stealing. Not only is she the daughter of a lowly maid, she's also a poisonous woman who tried to harm the master of the house." Her accusations were extremely vicious. Under Dao law, if a servant plots to harm their master's family, the punishment is the gruesome execution of Ling Qi. Chu Yuan sat in the main seat, his fingers lightly tapping the armrest, watching me with a half smile, half sneer. "Oh, Lu Yen says you set the trap to frame her. Do you plead guilty? Your Grace, you see clearly, this woman will never confess." I gave a slight curtsy, my voice crisp and steady. "Lu Jin has insisted she is the true legitimate daughter and that I am her substitute. But in truth, from the very beginning, that so-called Lu family blood jade was forged by her." At those words, the whole hall erupted in uproar. Although stripped of his title, Lu Yongcheng was also brought along to sit in on the hearing today. At my words, he suddenly struggled up. "Nonsense. That blood jade is real. It even bears the Lu family crest. Is it true or not? A test will tell." I turned around without haste and looked at the presiding judge. "Your Honor, the Dao law stipulates that in disputes of lineage, a blood test may be conducted in court. I beg you, in front of the 3 courts and the regent, let Lu Jin and Duke Lu Yuan drip blood for a paternity test." When Lu Jin heard this, a flicker of panic crossed her eyes. But she quickly composed herself. She seemed to possess an absolute confidence in the blood test. Test it then. I am indeed my father's biological daughter. Our blood will naturally match. Lu Jin sneered and stood up. The Minister of Justice looked at Chu Yuan. Seeing Chu Yuan nod slightly, he ordered someone to bring over a bowl of clear water. Lu Jin couldn't wait and bit his finger. A drop of blood fell into the bowl. Lu Yongchang was also pulled forward and pricked his finger. The 2 drops of blood quickly moved together in the water, and were about to merge. Lu Jin looked at me triumphantly, a cruel sneer curling at the corner of his mouth. Lu Yen. Do you see that? The blood has merged. I'm the true legitimate daughter. You fake. Framing the main family today, I'll watch you beaten to death with sticks. Just when everyone thought the outcome was decided, I suddenly stepped forward quickly and overturned the bowl of water. Clang! The porcelain bowl shattered, splashing water stained with blood all over the floor. How dare you? In the court. How can you be so insolent? The Minister of Justice thundered. I ignored him, turned and pointed at the water on the floor, and said coldly, Gentlemen, look, this water has been mixed with alum. Everyone bowed their heads to look. They saw that the blood, which had originally mixed together, rapidly separated upon contact with the dust on the ground. And a layer of white powdery crystalline substance appeared at the edges of the watery stains. What's going on? Lu Yongchang widened his eyes. The medical texts say that alum dissolves in water. No matter whose blood is dropped in, it will mix. But if oil enters the water, even the blood of a biological father and son won't blend. I looked coldly at the ashen-faced Lu Jin. Miss Lu, when you were in the prison, what method did you use to bribe the jailer and tamper with this water? Lu Jin trembled all over as if all her strength had been drained, and collapsed to the ground. She had never expected that her last-ditch trick would be seen through by me at a glance. Fetch fresh water again. Use the rootless water from the Imperial Medical Hall, Chu Yuan barked, his gaze as cold as a knife. Soon, a bowl of pure rootless water was brought up. This time, under everyone's watchful eyes, when drops of Lu Jin's and Lu Yongchang's blood fell into the water. They remained as distinct as ink in water, each occupying its own corner. No matter how it was shaken, they could not merge in the slightest. No, impossible. This can't be. Lu Yongchang stared at the bowl as if struck by lightning. You are not my Jiner. Who exactly are you? Lu Jin collapsed completely to the ground. She knew it was over for her. She is of course not Lu Jin. I took a sealed dossier from my sleeve and handed it to the Minister of Justice with both hands. Sir, this is the evidence I secretly obtained. This woman's real name is Lu Chui. She is an escaped slave from a private brothel on the outskirts of the capital. The blood jade on her was stolen long ago from a deceased merchant. Seeing the Lu family insignia carved on the jade and hearing that the Duke's household once lost a daughter, she colluded with several ruffians to fabricate an identity-claiming spectacle in an attempt to seize the Duke's estate. As the dossier was read aloud, every piece of evidence was clear and undeniable, both witness testimony and physical proof. Lu Chui forged an identity and privately stole a tribute of the imperial household. Her crimes are unforgivable. Since you knew she was a fake, why didn't you say so earlier? Lu Yongchang pointed at me, shaking with anger. You watched her squander the Marquis' estate with your eyes wide open. You watched the Marquis' household fall into this state. I turned around and looked at the man who had once loomed above everyone and had discarded me without hesitation for the sake of gain. My eyes were full of derision. Former Marquis, you seem to be mistaken about one thing. I walked slowly to the center of the hall and, in the midst of complete silence, took from my bosom an object wrapped in bright yellow silk. It was the iron certificate and imperial edict granted by the late emperor. I suddenly unfurled the silk banner, and the 4 gilded characters flashed, blinding everyone. Look closely. I am the Princess Yenin, personally bestowed by the late emperor, the legitimate, unquestioned, and sole heir of this Duke's household. My voice shot up, sharp and resounding. Blood tests. How dare you attempt such a swap? Today you'll see what true self-inflicted ruin looks like. The hall fell deathly silent. Everyone was too stunned by the sudden reversal to speak. Inside the main chamber, there was a silence like death. All eyes focused on the roll of bright yellow iron token edict in my hand. The vivid red imperial seal on it pierced Lu Yongchang's eyes and completely shattered Song Che's last sliver of hope. Princess Yenin. How can this be? Lu Yongchang collapsed to the ground, muttering to himself as if he had instantly aged 10 years. He had always thought I was merely a pawn he used to take the blame. But he never expected that this pawn not only held the lifeblood of the Duke's mansion, but also possessed a noble status that even he, once a duke, could not attain. I looked at him coldly. When my birth father saved your life, the late emperor, grateful for his loyalty, specially conferred me the title Princess Yenin and granted this iron token edict, only because the late emperor considered my youth and feared I would attract trouble if my status was revealed. Did he command you to secretly raise me and to confer the title formally when I came of age? In the 15 years since, you have squandered without restraint and hollowed out the Duke's mansion into an unfillable hole. If I had not secretly used the yen funds to plug it, the Duke's mansion would have long been confiscated and exterminated. My words were gems and every sentence a blade. Each one struck hard at Lu Yongchang's heart. You preserved your empty title and continued to feed on me by letting a brothel runaway ride roughshod over me. I turned sharply, my fierce gaze drilling into Lu Jin, who was kneeling on the ground. Since you so love the wealth of the Duke's household, then accept the capital crime of privately stealing imperial tribute yourself. Lu was so frightened she was no longer herself. Unable even to beg for mercy, she thought she'd grasped a high branch, not realizing it was a vine coated in deadly poison. Clever as she thought herself to be in climbing it, she would only end up pierced and torn, dying without a grave. My lord. Gentlemen. I withdrew the iron token and the red document, and bowed slightly toward Chu Yuan and the chief judge of the 3 departments seated at the main table. Now that the truth is clear, Lu forged her identity and stole tribute there is conclusive evidence. As for the former duke, Lu Yongchang, he was lax in managing his household and is also suspected of embezzling large sums from the Ministry of Revenue. As for Minister Song, my gaze slowly turned to Song Che, who had been cowering in the corner as if trying to make himself invisible. Song Che trembled all over, instinctively wanting to step back. But his ashen face and evasive eyes had already betrayed the utter fear in his heart. As an imperial official, Song Che not only fanned the flames of Lu Chui's falsified identity, he also attempted to use the engagement to seize the Guogong mansion's property. Now that the truth is exposed, he tries to wash his hands of it. Such an ungrateful, heartless wretch remaining in the court would only soil the bureaucracy of Dayo. My tone was calm, but every word cut to the core. People like Song Che, refined egoists, fear nothing more than disgrace. What I intended to strip from him was not only his power, but the hypocritical mask on which his existence depended. Yener. Listen to my explanation. Song Che suddenly dropped to his knees with a thud, crawling to my feet, his face full of remorse and pleading. I was wrong. I truly was blinded by that wicked woman. Yener. Don't 15 years of our bond mean more than one misunderstanding? If you forgive me, I will take you as my lawful wife at once. I will never take a concubine in my life. Looking at his disgusting, groveling, tail-wagging expression, I felt nothing but nausea. 15 years of friendship. I chuckled lightly, my gaze filled with undisguised contempt. Song Che, you have a far too high opinion of yourself. In my eyes, from beginning to end, you are nothing more than a pompous clown. Do you think I would covet the title of your legitimate wife? What I, Lu Yen, have always wanted is the dominance over this world's chessboard, not to be a pathetic vassal under you. I stepped back, avoiding the hand he reached out, and spat out coldly 4 words. You are not worthy. Chu Yuan sat in the main seat, taking it all in. A satisfied curve tugged at the corner of his mouth as his slender fingers lifted in a slight wave. Bring the guilty woman Lu Chui to the death cell and execute her after 3 days. Strip Marquis of Eternal Nation Lu Yongchang of his title, confiscate his property, and exile his entire clan 3,000 li. As for Song Che, Chu Yuan glanced at him coldly. Strip him of all honors and emoluments. Never employ him again. Reduce him to commoner status. These 3 sentences were like 3 death warrants, completely pronouncing their death sentences. Lu Chui's shrieks, Lu Yongchang's wails, and Song Che's sobs of collapse intertwined and echoed through the empty hall. It was their own doing, and it was the most perfect reply I could give them. Stepping out of the Zhongren mansion's main gate, the sky outside had somehow cleared. Golden sunlight poured over the bluestone slabs, dispelling the days of gloom. I took a deep breath of the fresh air and felt as if the huge boulder that had pressed on my heart for 15 years had finally been completely shattered. What's the rush, Miss Lu? Are you not going to treat this prince to a celebratory cup of tea before you leave? Chu Yuan's voice sounded behind me. I turned and saw him in a dark robe, like a jade tree in the wind, smiling with a hint of something unreadable as he looked at me. You've helped this common girl so much a single cup of tea won't suffice. I raised an eyebrow slightly, a confident light flashing in my eyes. I've already reserved a full Manchuhan banquet at the Jishan Pavilion under the Yen name. I'm just waiting for your highness to attend. Chu Yuan gave a light laugh, stepped to my side, and walked shoulder to shoulder with me. Lu Yen, the move you made in this game is truly exquisite. Without bloodshed, you not only removed every obstacle, but also, as a matter of course, reclaimed everything that belonged to you. He turned his head, and his deep eyes shone with unabashed admiration and a trace of a different affection. The prince flatters me. If it weren't for your behind-the-scenes support stirring the waters, this game of mine wouldn't have gone so smoothly. I did not take credit, but I met his gaze without flinching. Then how about this? From now on, we play this game together. Chu Yuan stopped walking, his tone carrying a hint of seriousness. I looked at him, and scenes of his secret help over these days flashed through my mind. Though his actions were unpredictable, every move struck exactly at the heart of the matter. Working with him was, indeed, an immensely satisfying thing, since the prince has such refined interest. This woman will of course accompany him to the end. A brazen, brilliant smile curled at the corner of my mouth. The realm of Dayo is ever-changing with shifting fortunes. And I, Lu Yen, am no longer that pawn to be manipulated. I am the one who holds the chess pieces. I am the most dazzling variable in this chaotic age. The end. Thank you for listening. Please subscribe, like, share, and comment. Thank you.